now Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on HtR, the Reckoning, in the world of darkness. When we last left off, we began to dive into what your creed is. Your creed, which is both an intrinsic part of your nature, yet not truly a part of your nature, something that represents you in a way. Well, the last thing we're going to really consider when we're talking about creeds is how you actually go about building your character. Because this is an important and core aspect of your character. Your character should be treated like a real person. When you build your character, don't think about your creed. You have to think about your character as the person they were before their imbuing. What type of person they were, what they learned, what they did, things like that. Things that the reaction of the imbuing could lead you in a certain direction. You had your own ideals, your own beliefs in the system and the world as it was. And the exposure of these creatures and the monstrosities that are around you should reflect how you would react to them. Your reaction is a product of everything you were before. Granted, you may have new special and strange powers, but in the core, you are still human. Your approach to the hunt is not based upon any kind of distinct idealism from becoming a hunter itself. It's approached by how you were in your actual life, how society shaped you, and how you're reacting now to a change in the circumstances. Your reaction to everything that happened is your creed. That's the handle of it. That's what it really is. It's a reaction based upon who you are. So when you make a character, you don't say, I'm going to be that creed, or I'm going to be that creed, or I'm going to be that creed. No. You build the kind of person you want to play. And then at that point in time, you look at what creed would be appropriate to the person you're building. Or you ask your storyteller to assign one to you. Basically, the gut reaction your character would have had to reacting to the circumstances they're hitting might grant you a creed. The fact is, the hunt is a personal thing for each individual hunters. So identifying one or another as a certain creed is not something they actually do. It's a term that floats out there, but no one calls themselves this creed or that creed. You just are classified by others, perhaps, into it from the way you act, from the way you hunt. And these personal beliefs that you have tend to clash with other one's beliefs, other one's ways of thinking. Sometimes they get together, they get along. Other times it creates conflict. That's the concepts of the creeds themselves, counteracting each other and perhaps causing conflict. It's just the fact that those are your beliefs bringing that in, and they just so happen to pertain to creed X, Y, or Z. Unless you're on HunterNet a whole lot of time communicating with others, you're probably not going to get any particular terms of what your creed will be. On those people that are talking a lot online together, are communicating online, that's when you start getting those distinctions where they can say, oh, I'm a blank creed. More oftentimes, you just unconsciously connect with like-minded individuals when it comes to hunting and being in the shadows, being a hunter, and you form groups that way. This means, traditionally, a bunch of creeds get together of the same creed, work together because they have like minds. But, again, it's not a conscious decision, it's, oh, we think alike. These vague divisions are often shown by the multitude of names which are used to identify various creeds in the world itself. So you can see there are some vague distinctions and problems there that make it that grouping and using the idealism of creed within the game is not something that really exists. Hence why you have to look at your character before you look at your creed. Now, this doesn't mean you can't write a creed down on your character sheet. No, that's fine. But rather than try to conform what your character does and how your character acts to that creed, think about what your character's beliefs would be and how they intrinsically link to that creed. That how my character acts beforehand, before they were a hunter, links to that then, and that is why I'm associated with that. So, let's dive into talking about some of the creeds. We're going to start talking about a few of them today. There are technically 7 in the core book, but I am going to do a little bit of extra talking about the 2 other creeds which do exist. I will mention them. I won't provide nearly as much information about the 7 in the core Hunter the Reckoning book. But let's start with those, though, with the Defense Creed, which is, of course, of the Zeal virtue, and they're also known as Defenders. Defenders see themselves as protectors. They see themselves as grabbing on a piece of what is left over after the various battles and ensuing war against the creatures of darkness, and holding on to that. Holding on to a piece of the old, of the world as it is in their minds before the imbuing. Basically, rescuing just a little bit of that. Salvage a piece of old to prove that their fight against the unknown is worthwhile. Now, defenders do suffer from a number of problems. First off, they tend to be isolationists. In most common terms, this means that they seek the outskirts, the places where they can protect themselves and protect the little bit they have without having to worry about the big picture. Survivalist is a term that oftentimes can be used to describe certain members of the Defender Creed. Whether they were this way before the imbuing or after can be of complete difference. And these are people that oftentimes have family and friends that they want to protect. They try to bring them into this survivalist mentality where they can have them alone and not worry about these few people. Again, holding on to that shred. Now, if they don't have family or friends, a defender will oftentimes link on to the other hunters they work with. This can have problems too, as then in the right point in time, they might look to protecting a fellow hunter rather than striking the final blow against the creature or taking advantage of some kind of circumstance. They might leave that opening because of it. These are both 2 critical problems that can occur with hunters of the Defender Creed. The worst of these are the defenders that are intrinsically linked to a creature of the shadows, some kind of monstrosity. Maybe a family member or a friend turns out to be one of these creatures. They could seek to defend them even, to perhaps see if they can do something to keep them more towards a normal life and try to keep them away from the darkness that's within them. But in the same retrospect, they might protect them from other hunters. So you can see there's this mentality here that can transfer very dangerously depending on the circumstances of the defender itself. It's not going to occur for every defender, but these are problems that are intrinsic to the nature of a defender. Now, hunters, not always, but more oftentimes imbue when exposed to some kind of creature that has a single-minded target. Basically, this creature has one thing it's going for, and nothing you can do seems to stop it. Your attempting to interrupt it or speak to it will not stop it from going to its one target, regardless of you trying to negotiate with it or not. It might not be able to be even willing to harm you because of its need to get that target. There are other situations where it could be a siege against a work or a house where you as a defender have to sort of quell the fear around you while fending off the horrible supernatural attacker protecting those around you. Both are circumstances which oftentimes lead to defenders. Now, if you're building a defender character, high perception is useful for many of their abilities. Also, a good amount of empathy and willpower are good for the other portions of their character creation. These 3 things are a kind of core triumvirate of statistics that you might want to look at when building a defender. When it comes to backgrounds, many of them do have allies, and those that might have been in the position may have some type of contacts, especially if they were originally military or police. You have a starting conviction of 3. Now next I want to talk about innocence. It is of the mercy virtue, and they are known as innocents. Innocents accept the monsters for what they are, much as they accept their own sins that they have to do. They accept the darkness that they have to overcome and what they have to do for the lives that they live. They are wide-eyed individuals, as best described. They often seek more peaceful resolution between creatures and humans, or at very least for the hunters around them, including themselves, to retain a level of humanity and decency, and oftentimes see some of these creatures as for what they may have once been, the humans they may have once been, not the monsters they are now. See the humanity in everything around them, and perhaps in that way maintain the humanity in those around them. They seek this almost wide-eyed, innocent path. Now, unfortunately, because they accept their own sins, they have trouble feeling guilty over their actions. If an innocent should do something, it will feel as though it was appropriate in the circumstances. They accept that they had to do that. So they can reach circumstances where feeling guilty just does not exist. Sometimes to stop some kind of misguided person or creature, you have to hurt them, and that's a fine thing. Sometimes you have to hunt things down, just to help a friend and keep them alive. And the guilt will never stop you from doing that. On the other hand, because of their nature, they can have things overpower them too. Sometimes you just don't want to leave your house, leave your home. You just want to curl up in a ball because you know if you go out there, you're going to have to do some of these things. Granted, once you do them, you know you have to do them. But not doing them is an option too. It's maybe you don't feel bad about what you do, but if you avoid it completely, that might be a thing. You figure out ways to not go hunting, to not go outside, to not interact with others. You got some hunter's blues which they can suffer from, which you could tell other hunters about why you're so depressed and sad, but seeing them might start your own cycle of depression and sadness over again. Some of them just run away then. Now, the worst part of it is shaming. Innocents can use that as a tactic against other hunters or against other innocents, that if you do an action that they don't feel is appropriate and that you could have avoided doing, they'll attempt to shame you for it. That, oh, you could have done that much better. Or, okay, you could have talked to them. You could have talked them down, negotiated with them. We didn't need to do that. Oh, shaming. It's a problem that innocents can have, and they can use as a tool to annoy the crap out of their fellow hunters. Now, the imbuing of an innocent can occur when they encounter a creature that looks a lot worse than it actually is. Something that looks horrifying and deadly and is not really much of a danger. Slight danger might be. Also, if there's something rearing up for some mayhem and they try to talk it down, that's something an innocent might do with their imbuing. Now, it doesn't always work to talk the big things down, but sometimes it does. There is evidence that it does sometimes. But again, whether or not it succeeds doesn't stop an innocent from trying again later. Now, charisma is a big must for innocents. Talking with people, negotiating, charisma is a big thing. And empathy is a critical part of that they can connect with the emotions of another. After that, innocents have quite a variety. There's a lot of different types of them, so you can find a lot of different forms beyond there. Now, they also have a starting conviction of 3. But that's it for today. So, I talked a little bit more about creeds and understanding how you would select one. You really don't select one. You more build your character and then add one in that seems appropriate, or have your storyteller do it. I then started talking about some of the creeds themselves, going over 2 today. The Defender, who is all about protecting a small group or individuals and has their own problems because of their own creeds and things that they face. And an Innocence, who hope to seek peace and resolution in ways that maybe doesn't need to hunt. Doesn't mean they're not ready to if they need to, but they're hoping for the best. In the next episode, we have 5 more creeds that are in the book, plus those other 2 which are special creeds which we will talk about, that we have to go over before we move on from here. But I hope you're having a great day. If you've ever played a Defender or an Innocent character and you have some great stories about playing them in Hunter, please leave it in the comments below. Love to hear the stories from you. Regardless, until the next time, I bid you farewell.